this joint meeting for the Newport City Council and the Port of Newport Commissioners meeting together. We're so glad you're all here. I want to start off with introductions, and if I might, I hope Spencer doesn't mind, but I would like to introduce my council to you, and then perhaps Paula, you can introduce your commissioners. I don't normally get to do that. We normally go around the room, but I just kind of feel like I'd like to. This is our first meeting kind of together since COVID. This is Councilor C.M. Hall, Councilor Ryan Parker, Councilor Aaron Collette, Councilor Beatrice Boteo, Councilor Cynthia Jacoby, and Councilor Dimar Goebel. And with that, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thanks again for having us. And today we have here the president of our board, Jim Burke, and I'm Paula Miranda, by the way, I'm the general manager, and Jim Burke.
Hi, everyone.
And we got the vice president, Gil Sylvia, secretary, Walter Chuck, and Commissioner Kelly Redford, and Commissioner Jeff Lucky.
And we'd like to thank you all here for coming tonight. We're going to go ahead and just take a few minutes to eat and socialize.
How about introducing everybody else that's in the room?
Oh, okay. Our city attorney, Dave Allen. Our city engineer, Chris Janigo. Our city Park and Recs director, Mike Kavanaugh. And our city recorder, Peggy Hawker. And if you want to...
With that?
How about Spencer?
Oh, and Spencer. Everybody knows that. Thank you, Dave Mark.
And we have from the port, we have Karen Hewitt. She's our administrative assistant. And Aaron Bretz is here somewhere. There we go. He's our director of operations. Unfortunately, Mark Brown is on a very well-deserved vacation, our finance director, so he couldn't be here. What is that?
There's other folks in the back of the room.
Oh, Angela is our PR person, and she's here in the background, kind of taking notes.
The city council isn't used to seeing me in council chambers. So. we should be recording this.
And we have a member of the public here, Jim.
You invited the public, so I am the public.
We miss the public.
We do.
I'm from South
And I hope you don't all mind, but I invited David Gomberg to come tonight. This is not a political payback by any stretch, but he's going to talk to us in a few minutes about the legislative session. And he had a wonderful time this year, and so he'll share those the tidbits of the session with us. So please go ahead and eat, and then when we're finished, we'll turn it over to David.
No,
Okay, let's go back to get started again. Just so everybody knows, this session is being recorded. Earlier today, I had a conversation with Representative Gomberg, and we talked about several different issues. And so I kind of asked him to come tonight because I think that we all have in common, because he is our representative, not just for the city, but also the port. And so I would like to turn it over to David for a few minutes. And then, David, if you want, you can excuse yourself if you wish, because I know you have a lot of things to do.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors, and commissioners. So good to be with all of you here tonight. And for your record and your vast internet audience, I will say I'm David Gomberg, state representative from House District 10, which stretches from Yachats to Tillamook and inland as far as Sheridan in Yamhill County. And I think most of you know that this year we have been working our way through a legislative session. And it's been a remarkable session in so many ways. Remarkable because, first of all, the Capitol building has been closed, an issue that is not without some controversy, but we have been forced to struggle with how we manage the people's business remotely and keep the people involved in that process. We went to remote meetings like most of you did, and we actually found by the end of session, more people had testified in front of legislative committees this year than in any previous session, perhaps because they didn't have to drive to Salem to do it. So we had the process of working our way through the session with the building closed and trying to make sure that we could keep it at least remotely open. We had some issues on the front doorsteps with some people unhappy about issues and policies as they evolved, and made some efforts to get into the building, getting into a confrontation with state police. That was a very sad day. And I will tell you that in addition that we've been working our way through a real roller coaster of a state budget. I mean, I don't have to tell you that at the beginning of the year, we thought people aren't working, businesses are closed, we're not going to be able to get income taxes or business taxes or even lottery income, and so that our budget was going to be in a free fall. That was the initial projections. And then as the year unfolded, we began to learn that people that are doing well in Oregon are actually doing pretty well. And people that aren't doing well are still getting an unprecedented degree of support from the state and the federal government. And at the end of the process, we found out that we actually had more money than we expected, particularly when the federal government came in and added $2.6 billion to the funds that we had to work with. Now, that was very important because it allowed us to balance the state budget. And in Oregon, we're required to actually balance the budget. We can't spend in a deficit situation. So we were able to put money into healthcare and education and transportation and public safety. That's all really important. By the way, I might mention for some of you that may be interested, when we first put the first draft of the budget together, there was a recommendation to cut small business development centers by 40%. I chair the committee that handles that budget, and it was one of the items that we took a look at. I wanted to make sure that they got out of the session intact because they've been doing heroic work for small businesses here on the Central Coast. And by the time we got out of the building, not only did they get funded at the current level, we actually were able to increase their budget for the next biennium by about 25%. That's good news. But I'm going to back up for a second because 2 years ago, we went through a legislative session, a normal legislative session, and we went into the building and said, we've got some issues here in Newport that we have great concerns about. And it has to do with our infrastructure, with our drinking water supplies, with our dams. Our dams that are in vulnerable shape, arguably the most vulnerable dams in the entire state of Oregon. And we were asking for $4 million to begin the permitting and planning process for replacing those earthen dams. Well, we worked our way through the legislative session. At the end of that session, we were able to acquire $4 million, which was a success. That was great news when we found out that we'd gotten the $4 million ask approved. And then the governor announced that she was thinking about vetoing it. I drove over to Salem. I sat down face to face with the governor, talked about how important this was. Why this dam and not others? Well, because this dam is ready, because we've done the studies, because we can show the list, and this dam is at the top of that list. And oh, by the way, if something goes wrong while we diddle around over priorities and policy, a lot of people are going to get hurt. We're going to lose the highway, and it'll take Newport a generation to recover. She decided not to veto the $4 million. But then COVID landed on us with a thud. And because the $4 million was being funded with lottery bonds, and because our restaurants and our taverns were closed and not selling lottery tickets, for the first time in 30 years, we didn't issue lottery bonds. And so that $4 million evaporated. And we had to go into Salem this year and start over again. Spencer and I were chatting for a few minutes over cake about the hearing where the Capital Construction Committee heard proposals. Now, this was a remote hearing, and they limited everybody to 2 minutes. And they only had 2 hours, so there were 60 people that got to testify. And we knew that there was money coming from the federal government. We wanted to be in the best possible place to advance projects and priorities here at the coast. Excuse me. So I sat down with a number of different community leaders, and we put a dozen proposals together. And I worked with them on preparing their testimony, and one after another, Spencer, they said, I'm working with Representative Gomberg on this project. Now, there were 12 people out of 60, so after a few minutes of this, the chair of the committee started kind of rolling his eyes, didn't he?
And I was nervous because I was about 10 of the 12, so we had all these other Gomberg requests ahead of time. I thought, oh, this isn't sounding too good for us, but...
Well, I said it was a remarkable legislative session, and the committees in charge did some remarkable things. For those of us here in Lincoln County, I will say that when the legislature adjourned at 5:37 Saturday night, one of the last bills that we passed was the capital construction budget bill. It included included money to replace the failing water tanks in Walport. That were ready to collapse and put them back in shape so they could provide water to households and water for firefighting. It included money to actually connect the Port of Toledo to the Toledo sewer system. Imagine trying to run a port without sewer connections and running out of porta potties. It included money for the Toledo Aquatic Facility, which they are trying to rebuild into a community center. It included money for a new fire station on Highway 20 in East Lincoln County to better support the travelers that are going up and down that highway every day, because right now when someone has an accident, they have to call ahead and get support from Toledo, about 12 miles away. It included money for the port of Depot Bay, which technically is not a port, it's a city department. But their docks are failing. They were worried because they don't have a tax base there that they were going to have to close down the docks in the smallest harbor in the world, which is going to have a detrimental impact on the tourism industry, the fishing industry, and our Central Coast prestige. So we got money for that. We got money for Lincoln City for the Cultural Center, who had also been scheduled to get funding from lottery bonds 2 years ago, and they were similar to Newport and having the rug pulled out from under them. We got money for the city of Sheridan, who was trying to put together a career technical education program, a new welcome center in Lincoln City at the Dee River Wayside. And also, I'm very pleased that we got some money for the Siletz Tribal Heritage Center in Siletz that they are working on. All those things were in the line. All of them made those asks. All of them got funded. Well, what about Newport?
The aquarium.
Oh, excuse me. How can I forget the aquarium? The aquarium's the other one that got the rug pulled out from under him. $5 million 2 years ago. We were a little anxious about trying to get that back on the priority list, but indeed we were successful in getting $5 million for the aquarium and their development of the Welcome Center, the galleries, and the Rehabilitation Center. So that was a big victory. But what about Newport? Well, you know, Newport needed this $4 million. It was a priority for me going in. I said, nothing is more important to me right now than getting that money back on the list for Newport so they can begin this dam project. But I think I got to apologize to Spencer because I think I gave him pause when I said, look, if we're going to go through all of this again, I want to do more than planning and permitting. I want to actually move some dirt. So I changed the proposal from $4 million to $14 million, from 4 to 14. And when the bill came out on Saturday night, $14 million was approved for the Newport dams. So remarkably, we here in Lincoln County have had a clean sweep on a number of different projects, which also include wildfire relief and COVID support. And I think that when we finally total out the numbers and all the nooks and crannies of this budget, we're looking at north of $50 million for different projects here in Lincoln County. We won't see that again. It's a remarkable number, and I am so very pleased to be able to come here tonight and share that good news with you. So,
thank you.
You thought I was crazy when I changed it to 14, didn't you?
I thought you were crazy, but a good crazy. So
you're at $21 million.
Yeah, indeed. So any questions I can answer for anybody? I apologize for giving you kind of both a quick overview and a long report.
yeah, I just would like to say, again, we from the city, we certainly appreciate your ongoing efforts on the dam, and to get the $14 million, I truly thought that was sort of a pipe dream, and when it sounded like it was gonna go through. I know the mayor tracked me down on the Bayfront and said, we got some good news on the $14 million and so we really appreciate that. That's gonna really jumpstart this project, provided we don't have another COVID pandemic and the bond sale doesn't go through, so, or a veto coming up. So.
I don't see either of them on the horizon right now. These are lottery bond funds, which means that the check, it will probably take at least 18 months to arrive, but now you've got some momentum. Now you can go to the federal government and say, we got an $80 million project and the state's already kicked in the first 10, so what do we do next?
David, how many months?
I'm saying a minimum of 18 months.
18 months.
All I can say is I hope they come up with some more of that because we have some capital improvements on the horizon here in the next couple of years.
You and I are going to talk.
Yeah. Well, when David told me that we were going to get the $14 million, first he said you have to clear out an office somewhere at City Hall because the cash is a large amount.
You said my office. Dean, you said my office.
That's a great idea.
Or the mayor's office.
Yeah.
I have a question, David. Any ballpark figure on job creation?
You mean for the dams or all those different projects? Well, each project is going to be a job creator and a job sustainer. And it's difficult at this point to imagine how many people will be put to work on those dams. And the number that fortunately we don't have to calculate is how many jobs are lost if the dams fail. I guess that's still an issue that's around the corner. But I'm looking at the dams in not the dams, the docks in Depot Bay, and keeping the fishing fleet going there. The smallest allocation we brought home was for the Heritage Center in Siletz, $750,000. The tribe is going to match that on a 3-to-1 basis for a total of a $2.5 million project. They have announced that their planning indicates that project alone will generate 170 jobs.
Well, Spencer, could you explain to me, I know you and I talked about this, but could you explain what that $14 million will buy us on the dam?
Yeah, the 14.
We can barely hear the people wearing masks. We
Okay.
heard David just fine, but we can hear Spencer. We can barely hear Paula. We can barely hear you. So,
When you talk,
Yeah.
take a mask off?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we're getting very close to not having to wear masks. So, but when we're speaking, we'll lower our masks. So, but the question from Dietmar was, how are we going to use the $14 million that's coming through? And we're working through the specific details on that, but that will certainly cover a lot of the design work and the permitting work that will be up front. And also what we're looking at is potentially using it for some of the auxiliary things that we have to do, such as the construction of access roads and those sorts of things, which will kind of get us, that's going to get us pretty close to, that amount of money spent. So we're working through those issues to determine how that will play out. We'll be meeting with the council to discuss a specific plan as soon as the governor signs the bill. We don't want to prejudge anything too soon. So, but we'll be sitting down with the council to kind of lay out that specific process going forward. And again, there's a delay. So we've got $1 million that's appropriated out of our funds for this year. That'll keep things moving along with the permitting and the design work. But we're going to have to figure out the timing of how to tie in the funds once the bonds are sold by the state. So
Now that we have that money and are committed to have that money, we're going to pursue federal grants. Is that what?
we are pursuing federal grants, and this is going to be the second email I sent out after the mayor let me know about Representative Gomberg's success on funding here was to our lobbyists in Washington. I said, "See what the state of Oregon did? It's up to you now to come through with some dollars." It's going to be a long haul on the federal funds, but the $14 million is absolutely essential for the state to make the argument for substantial federal funding.
We'll be using our consultants for that.
Yes, and there's a lot of work to do at the federal level yet, and And so it's going to be, a relatively long haul.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
And just to reiterate, this is not the end game. We still have a lot of work to do and a lot of money to try to find for this dam project. And I would also like to say David has been a huge champion for many years on this project. He just didn't start 2 years ago asking for the $4 million. He's been with us several times. We've testified before senators, congressmen, all kinds of bureaucrats in Washington, and David has been right there at the table with us. So he's well-versed in this project, and we in the city totally thank you very much, David, for all your hard work. Very appreciated.
Yeah, very welcome. Very welcome. I said this is a remarkable year. It's a little hard to put it in context. When I say to you that we've got a dozen or more projects totaling more than $50 million, let me tell you that 2 years ago, we thought we'd had a wonderfully successful legislative session because we got 3 projects here funded with about $9 million. And so look at where we are now. That might provide you a little bit of context on really how transformative this year is going to be for us.
Any further questions or comments for David?
Right.
Thank you, David.
We appreciate all your support, and we also know that you're a huge advocate of the Coastal Caucus as well. I know that one of your projects is to get more money out of Portland for the coast. And so we appreciate your support.
All right, I'm going to slip away, everybody. I will see you commissioners on Thursday for the ribbon cutting. And I expect I'll probably see a few counselors there as well. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I'd like to turn it over to Paula.
All right. Well, Peggy, I don't know if you have the presentation you do.
That's good with your mask down today.
Yeah, I'm gonna take my mask off so you guys can hear me.
You got a little vaccine card to show us?
I do. You want to see it? I spoke to Spencer, and he asked me to do kind of a little bit of an overview of the port and ports generally. I think oftentimes people have a lot of confusion about who we are and what ports do in general, because there are several different ports around the state of Oregon, and each one of them do different things. But I just want to point out, next slide, please. So ports in Oregon are created on the Oregon Statute 777, and that basically, except for the Port of Portland, and that basically stipulate everything we can do and not do. So occasionally there are some changes. Actually, just about 4 or 5 years ago, we had some changes on the legislation where it was requested by the ports to make some changes. One of them actually helped the Port of Toledo because of the shipyard issue. But typically, those are pretty well spelled out. And ports tend to be based on the community it serves. So sometimes you have a community that it's waterborne, and you're going to focus on vessels in the harbor, on the river, whatever that is, and that can be recreational, it can be commercial, it can be cargo, it can be a lot of things. But ports also have airports. You can own train terminals or just spurs. You can own even power generating, abilities, and there are a lot of things that we can do. It's more of a matter of life, and some ports don't even have water, like Port of Tillamook Bay. They're actually not on the water, but they have industrial parks, they have an airport, and typically ports are very active in economic development and opportunities like that. Typically it's based on logistics, even if you don't have an actual water or airport, you could have a need for warehouses for the trade business. You know, you're still going to have trucks coming and going. You still need to provide that somewhere. So there are really a lot of things you can do with ports. And if you start really looking, I actually pulled out few areas of the ORS that I thought, maybe I'll point this out in that, but there are like so many. As you can see here, everything is yellow because it's just like tons of things we can do, but you're gonna find that we can't do it all. You know, you gotta pick what's important to your port, and if you wanna do something more, if you're like, okay, we achieved that, we wanna move forward with something else, well, you gotta make sure you're able to do that through the ORS 777, because if we can't, we're not gonna step there. But if you're ever curious, yeah, just Google it, you know, ORS 777, you're gonna find it very easily, and you're gonna see so many things we can do. Ports usually manage very much like a corporation, even though we're a public entity. Finch call us a quasi-entity because we are operating for the public good, but we really have to make money in order to do what we do. If you look at our finances, only 1% of our funds actually come from property taxes. Right now, we have another 9% coming from bonds because of the terminal that it was issued a few years ago. But eventually that will terminate and, you know, it's going to be paid off, and then we're going to go back to that either 1-2%, which varies on and off. And when you look at a $15 to $20 million budget, you're really talking about a lot of business that we do in order to be where we are and do what we need to do. Often people feel like, well, maybe you should do this or should do that more in addition to what we do. But there's only really so much we can do with the funds that we have. In order to do way more than people wish we could, we would have to raise fees and bunch of other things that we try to avoid because we're trying as much as we can to do the best for the business of the community as well. So next slide, please. So here's just a little perspective of what the port looked like. If you get to the next slide. Well, the port was created back in May 26th of 1910. So as you can tell, we have been around for quite some time, more than 100 years. You know, actually 110 years, 111 years. So we've done a lot of work. And if we can get to the slide, you're going to see what the port used to look like back. Actually, that was not even, I think it's in the 40s.
Is there an issue with the advancing?
We're having a little problem with this.
Yeah, but anyway, if you can get back, that would be great because I can. Some of the slides were showing some of the port's properties, so you can't really see it. It's an old picture just showing what Newport used to look like way back then. Yeah. You guys pretty much know where we are located, but we do have a slide here that shows that the port encompasses about 59 square miles, and that basically goes from Other Rock to Seal Rock. So within 6 mile inland, that's sort of our port district. So it's there's the historic picture. If you can, yeah, there you go. And you can go on to the next slide now. Thank you. And so basically, we are just a little bit beyond Newport. And I'm showing here about 10,800 persons, but that's kind of probably a little bit outdated in counting with Newport's population plus the populations of some of the rural areas that goes beyond that. So our mission is to build and maintain waterfront facilities, promote support projects and programs in cooperation with other community organizations and businesses that will retain, create new jobs and increase community economic development. And what is our vision? What we want the Port District to be like is the port will serve as the premier Oregon coast port for the commercial fishing fleets, for recreational fishing and tourism, and for ocean observation and marine research support. We'll be one of the top 2 Oregon coast ports for waterborne commerce while protecting and enhancing the beauty and integrity of the natural environment, which is the foundation of our working waterfront community. So every so many years we go through and trying to revisit our mission and our vision to make sure we're still in sync with that. And when we do so, we obviously put that out there. Everybody has a chance to participate. Today, our facilities encumber several areas of the city here. We have, and if you can... One more, sorry. That's okay. That's the North Commercial Marina over there. As you know, we have all of our commercial docks in that area. That is Port Dock 1, Port Dock 3, 5, and 7. And we have our ribbon cutting here this next Thursday on the 1st for the renovation of our pier at the Port Dock 5. So hopefully we'll see.
Oh, I thought that was for CM's birthday.
That's right. We're trying to party for CM for her birthday. Yes, absolutely. And so hope to see you all there. So for the next slide, you're familiar with the international terminal. I put a couple pictures there just to show you some of where that money went to, the bond money. You know, we had to do some environmental work. As you probably heard that we had 2 ships that were buried over there in order to create the terminal. I believe they were leaking. One of them was removed, and now we still have one sitting there.
Did you say 2 ships buried?
Yeah, they sunk the ships.
Okay.
And they're concrete ships, but one of them was leaking. There were some issues with the environment. So we went ahead and dealt with that. And part of that bond, it wasn't just about attracting business to the area. Part of it was, but part of it was also taking care of the environmental issue. So today, as you can see on the right, there is the beautiful terminal we have today. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that and what we're looking into the future for that terminal. Next slide, please. So next one, you see South Beach Recreational Marina. We are, especially in the COVID era, we are extremely busy. You know, everybody found their way outside and the outdoors. It's been sold out, RV park and marina, everything is so busy. And that's a good thing. If you can put up the next one, please. Next one you see is the RV park. And right along with the marina and the RV park, you're going to see in South Beach also all the tenants we have there, Rogue Brewery, NOAA, OSU, the Oregon Coast Aquarium. Also, I have to mention England Marine is on the north side. I didn't point that out. And if you can, keep going there. We have there's South Beach. You see the OSU property that is a lease from the port, and they only paid $10. And the whole point of the port bringing OSU here wasn't for us to make money. It was to bring an opportunity to Newport back in the 60s. So we have been working with them. That lease just renewed for another 4 years for another $10. Make big bucks there, but we're happy to have them. We know they really brought a lot of good opportunities for this area. And obviously we continue working with NOAA with 10 years into their lease, so we will continue working with them for another 10 here, and hopefully we can renew that lease. And let's see here. And besides that, I just want to point out that we do all this work with 24 employees, so, and 5 commissioners. So we have a lot going on. As you can tell, the whole bay is surrounded by port business. And it keeps us busy, but we have really good commissioners and good employees. And at this point, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer. Just know that we do have some items that is already listed on the agenda, so we'll have more opportunities for that as well. Any questions?
I have one. Yeah. Who took your photos? Like, I'm guessing they were with a drone, but they were really well done. And when were they done?
You know, I went through our photo library and picked a whole bunch of pictures, so I don't know at this point. I'm sure it was a variety of people. So.
Well, I've gone to several port meetings and I'm kind of a liaison to the port. And of late, you've had it on YouTube rather than on being participant. Mm-hmm. But one of the questions take my mask off. Yeah, sorry. There was some discussion about Port Dock 7 and re-engineering that whole thing. Are you guys still working on that, and how's that going?
Yes, so there have been some issues with the dock for quite some time. So it seems like every year the dock keep tipping away. This year, for instance, we lost another 66 feet of it. So looking from the 80s, we lost over I think it was like 400 feet, if I don't, about 400 feet worth of dock. That's a lot of docking, that we lost throughout the years. The problem with that is as you lose it, it makes it more difficult to mitigate, to, recreate it. So what we're looking at this year, we put some money aside to do some assessment just so we can keep what we have until we're able to reconstruct. But the main goal this year is to do some planning. We have budget some money to do planning, which include actual design and permits and things like that. Because you can't really get big money to reconstruct until you have a plan. I know there are all these monies floating around on the federal level and even on the state level for that matter, but we can't go and ask for the money because we don't have a plan. So our goal this year is to be ready, and actually right now I'm working on getting federal money to do the plan because the plan is expensive too. It's at least a couple $100,000. So I'm working with our grant writer right now and looking for ways, most likely maybe an EDA fund, but we're looking into getting that money. And I also talked to the state. The state is willing to put part of it, but they usually would fund maybe $50,000 for a plan. And we believe that dock will take about $15 to $18 million to reconstruct.
How much?
$15 to $18 million. Yeah, it's going to be very expensive. Meanwhile, though, we are also working with the Army Corps of Engineers on creating a dredge channel through the commercial area, which if that goes through, we're in the feasibility study portion right now, and they're paying half of that. It's a $900,000 project, and Aaron is working hard with the Army Corps right now. And that usually they don't tend to fund private accesses like that. They fund the channel. They don't then, but they have this one they call Section 107. It's a project, it's special projects they do, and they had agreed to do that. And so we started that feasibility study. And if everything goes accordingly, we're probably looking anywhere from $3 to $10 million, depending what processes we decide to do, and they would fund 90% of that, and they would maintain the channel. That would definitely help with the future of Port Dock 7 as well, as we're trying to look into what we would design and what kind of vessels we'll get, so we're able to get more vessels and maybe some of the newer, largest vessels that keep increasing in size all the time, and that's the intent.
Are you able to accommodate everybody, or do you have to turn people away right now?
Right now, we turn people away all the time. Our marina, from my understanding, is about 110% in its capacity, you know, so we just don't have space for everyone. And every new fish season, whatever that is, you know, different things, like this year now, every year now we're getting more squid boats, you know, coming in from California and Washington. And the problem with that is during those different times, you know, people, especially the folks that are residing here, they get frustrated because we have those guests coming from outside, but they need a place to go as well. So yeah, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to accommodate everyone.
I have a quick question. How's that new ice plant going?
Well, the ice plant is really not the port. It's
Okay.
the next door neighbor. So when you look at the international terminal, it's difficult to figure out what's port, what's not. There is actually a majority of the property there. It's about 30 acres of it belongs to Rondas Inc. And they're the ones that started that ice plant. We actually have a lease with them because we have dredge material on that, but eventually the intent is to, we're supposed to remove it because they requested that we remove, and that's going to be very expensive for the port to remove it, but because they wanted to develop that whole property besides the ice plant.
So that pier they're reconstructing across from the Ripley's thing, that's not going to be the new ice plant, or that concrete pier there?
That's another
Steve-
private.
Steve-
That
Webster's
Dave
place.
Webster, that's another private developer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a private developer.
Is
The
that a
only
leasee
thing-
of the port, or is that just private land?
No, the only thing we did on that property is, our property, Port Dock One was encroaching on that a little bit, and they want to square it off the property, and they asked if we could remove part of it, which is mostly on the Department of State Lands property anyway. And we did that, but that's his own development. We really have nothing. Obviously, we will work together. One of the things we talk about it is being a partner in a way where if we need additional space for Port Dock One, if we have a vessel there that, you know, encroach on his property and vice versa, that we could, you know, figure out a way to work together on that. But besides that, it's his own business. We have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, just might be helpful to indicate, besides the major ports on kind of on Bay Boulevard, what other property is held by the port?
Right. Again, you know, just because you have a business that is waterborne doesn't mean automatically that belongs to the port. What we have there is basically the little dock where the sea lions are. So you have that, and beyond that, there are several other businesses, restaurants, and the processing plant there. And then you start getting to Port Dock 3 and 5, which is where the Chelsea Rose is. You know, so that's Port Dock 3. And then moving forward, then you'll see where the pier is. It takes you to port in front of the museum, the Maritime Museum. Takes you to Port Dock 5. And you go a little bit further, then you get into Port Dock 7. It's where our office currently is. And our property goes all the way to England Marine. And then you see another marina there that does not belong to us. It belongs to the Embarcadero. So there are private marinas in the bay as well. So not everything belongs to the port. Does that cover?
And then you forgot the former charter shop that's owned by the port.
Okay, well, I thought that was on the
that's on the
agenda. I was
agenda.
gonna, but if you want to talk about it now, we can.
No, we'll cover it on the agenda.
Okay, sure.
Okay, I don't see Heather here, so
No.
No.
she's not gonna be here, okay.
Yeah, Heather is ill, and so she had to cancel, and she wanted to do it because she wants to do a presentation to the city and do a presentation to the port, and this was the perfect opportunity to do both, but,
I was just gonna have to do two.
yeah.
Okay, well, I'll turn it over to Spencer right now for urban renewal update.
Okay, I've got, want to take one of each there. One of each there. So urban renewal has been an important part of the city for quite some time. And just wanted to update the Port Commission on what's happening in this area. And so when we established the north side Port District, one of the requests we had from the Port Commission was to consider a district for the international terminal, which is the color photo with the map on it, called McLean Point Urban Renewal District. This urban renewal district was established, and it has a very narrow focus, and that was primarily to deal with the extension of sewer, storm drainage, and other utility upgrades, and some street improvements to help facilitate the use of that property at that location. Again, with urban renewal districts, the revenue that urban renewal districts get is an increment of the growth of taxes from the time that the district was established in 2015 to whatever the property value is of that district today, taxable value. And that increment is captured by urban renewal or use to help fund these particular projects. And so again, this is a key district that I think at some point will play a role, in extending sewer to this area. And again, I just want to remind the Port Commissioners that this district really exists at the request of the Port back when we were developing these urban renewal districts. And this is the fact sheet on that particular district. So it's going to enable us at some point to extend utilities to that property to help further development on either the international terminal or the private property that's there as well. And so again, that's a district that is directly related to the port itself. The second thing I distributed here is South Beach has been one of our major urban renewal districts. South Beach has been in existence for many years, and we're reaching the end of that particular district. The last projects that can be started in South Beach will be in 2025, and the Urban Renewal Agency has hired consultants to develop that last plan on how we're going to spend those final proceeds for this particular district. Again, there's been conversations, I think, with Paula and others from the port talking about this issue by our consultants. But again, what I handed out here is kind of the timetable for going through this process. One of the key things that we're really looking at is there's certainly in South Beach, as that area has continued to evolve and grow, and as we look at potential student housing being developed in this area, there definitely is a need for some additional service and retail type businesses in South Beach. The Urban Renewal Agency owns that acreage right on 101, where the South Beach Church is, and where some other projects have been removed, and where the new intersection is being constructed at 35th and 101. Part of this process is really to help guide the Urban Renewal Agency in how to best promote the development of this property that would be sold for development at some point in the future. And again, things that continually get mentioned in the processes so far are things like a small grocery store or a gas station or other service needs that are important so that we can have more needs met on the south side of the bridge to limit the number of people that have to cross over. And as we hope to develop a growing student population from Oregon State University with the Marine Studies project, again, those needs need to be met on this site as well. So again, starting in July, we're going to be doing a virtual meeting. Stay tuned for that. We'll get some notices out on that. But if you have thoughts or ideas you want to convey for the conclusion of the South Beach district, please do so. And as a Port Commission, if there's any specific things that you want to convey in this process, please do so in the near future so that we can incorporate those thoughts into the final plan for this district. Again, we have to commit projects by 2025, and they have to be completed by 2027, and that's when the increment will cease for that particular district. So the good news for those of us, including the city and the port, that receive property tax payments is once that district is retired, there's going to be a significant a bump in taxes from the South Beach district. Unfortunately, your operating millage is very, very small, so it might be another $10 for you guys, but it'll be more substantial for some of the other taxing jurisdictions. So, any question on urban renewal from anybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
So are the taxes currently being collected here, are they going to the renewal district, or are they
Yes.
just going to the city?
Yeah. So what happens is that increment each year gets collected, and one of the beneficial things is as leases that the port had are discontinued, that property comes on the tax roll, and then we capture that entire increment for what those property taxes are, because it goes from zero to whatever the value is. So we encourage you to continue canceling those leases, but that certainly will help develop the funds necessary to make some long-term improvements that will help that area continue to service the port and service the community and economic development in the community. So, other questions on urban renewal? Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we're going to have Paula talk about business recruitment.
Yeah, so Spence and I discussed a little bit of what's going on at the international terminal, and I know everybody's curious to find out, and especially mostly focusing on cargo business. First of all, as you know, during COVID time, not much happened. Ports that have cargo business pretty much went into a stall. Things were really quiet. A lot of people lost business because a lot of the business were coming from overseas and things weren't happening. People stopped manufacturing and a whole bunch of things like that. People weren't expanding, people weren't moving, so it was a difficult time to do anything. We did do some research to figure out what could work there. I was actually trying to get a marketing report done for that site. Try for grant didn't happen. We still have that in our budget, so we'll look into it. But meanwhile, I have been actually working with a couple companies, one international and one national, on the forest industry side of things. It is a tough area to get cargo business, and people still look at the 90s when the new port used to have cargo business coming in. And problem with that is some of those vessels were smaller vessels, and so they have less of a draft need. Nowadays, a lot of those smaller vessels are going idle. People are discontinuing them because it's not economical for a lot of folks to really bring a small vessel. Well, unless the vessel is gigantic and can carry a lot, it's just not economical anymore. And what they're doing is sometimes if they find business where they can collect a bit of a product here, a bit there, and get into an area where they don't need much draft, they may be able to do that. But once they have a full vessel, that may drag a bit more and require a deeper draft. As a lot of people think that we're at 40, but only the entrance of the bay is at 40 feet deep, okay? As you get to the channel, the Army Corps is only required to dredge to 30 feet, although they always tend to go a little bit deeper to another 2, 3, 4, 5 feet, but the reality is they don't have any requirement, and then we keep our berths around 40 as well. With that said, finding vessels that can come here at 30 feet, it's very difficult. Likewise, then we have to look at the height of the bridge. I even look at possibility of cruises. Obviously, cruise now is off question because of COVID and
They're coming back.
Well, I know that the Port of Astoria got hurt big time because they had cruises and they weren't able to do anything with that business. So, but for us here, I look into it, I picked up from some old research that has been done, and it's difficult because the smallest vessels that I could find, they were still too big to get under the bridge. And then the vessels get too small, then they really have a hard time bringing passengers in and out of through the Pacific Ocean, because it's a very rough ocean, as you can tell. You know, as you get out of past the jetty, it's really rough. So unlike some of those smaller cruises that go around, like say the Columbia River, you know, they have a long length to go and stop in several areas. Here we have a small bay, so to have somebody just come here and stay in the bay doesn't pencil out. And so I'm still looking at it. There's still some, I had conversations with some folks that were looking into maybe doing something to Eureka, Newport, and eventually Astoria. But we're still trying to figure out vessels that could work for that. Again, meanwhile, I can't really say much about the folks that I'm working with right now because we're still in the negotiations, but we do have a couple people we're working with, and we'll see what that takes. Hopefully we can make something work. And this is, and once we get conversations to a point where we feel like, okay, maybe there's a reality to this, obviously we got to get the existing users involved, which is the fishermen that are already using the terminal. And we got, depending on the type of business, we gotta get the city involved because of transportation and things like that. If we have to get trucks on the road, because that's another thing we don't have here, it's trains. Most cargo usually look at draft and trains. Those are big things that for transportation that we need. Meanwhile, we also waiting to figure out what the Oregon State University is going to do with their bid for the wave energy. We had conversations with a couple different contractors that were bidding on that. If they were to win, they would most likely use our terminal. And not only it will be probably a year project going for the installation, but there will be a recurring maintenance as well. But we don't know. There are some contractors that may do something else and not use the port. And so we don't know at this point where they are with that. And that's pretty much what I have at the moment. So I don't know if there's some specific questions that you have.
I have a question. You mentioned 40 feet, but then what is Astoria?
Well, the Columbia River in general is it's dredged to 45.
So, I guess because I'm thinking about the cruise thing. Not, you know, I get that it might not go under the bridge, but I'm just curious, like, because not necessarily cruises aren't necessarily all going up the Columbia River. Right.
The cruises don't drag as much as a big container ship or a big ship. They're a little bit shallower. So that doesn't seem to be the problem. It's mostly the masts are quite high. You know, the very top of a ship, it's usually 170 to 200 and some feet, and we're here at 138, I believe.
I think it's 124.
124? I think it's more 130. Okay, but it's somewhere around that. It's very shallow, very low in comparison to what we even possibly can think of as far as those big cruise ships are.
I know that several years ago we had a lot of talk of cruise ships coming in here that they would use a tender to bring the tourists into the bay. And at the same time, my wife and I went to Europe on a cruise, and one day we had to use the tender to go from the ship inshore, and that was a very rocky road. And
yes.
We were talking about if you try to do it here and it was consistent, you're not going to have people that want to come into Newport because of it.
Yeah, and like I said, that's the same issue with a smaller vessel. It's a smaller cruise ship. Same thing. It's very rough. people get sick, and it takes the whole point of why they're even coming here. Because when you think about it, okay, you got the vineyards not too far. There people can take folks sea fishing and all kinds of things going on here in Newport that could be fun. But and if that's the case, if the cruise ship would come just outside, just in the area beyond the bridge, then the port wouldn't be very involved with that either. So unless they need a place to take them, to our docks.
And I know that on the Council of Governments Transportation Committee, there was some talk about bringing agricultural products from the valley here, grass seed particularly, especially when we redesigned Highway 20, that it would be trucked in here and then would be sent out here on smaller ships to a larger barge out at sea. But I don't think there's been any further discussion of that. Beatrice?
Yeah, I have a question regarding to the TSP plan, because we are working on that. And I want to hear from you, what wishes do you want to see in the TSP plan? It's the planning process right now, but I think it would be nice to hear from your group, your team, what you hope to see with the plan.
Yeah, no, that would have been a good product to do. Although it's a matter of, first of all, to ship certain things is how do you ship? Because our port, for instance, is not a container ship port, but there are ways to ship that. It will be more like bulk. One of the first things that I did when I came on board is I went and met with the Longshore folks, and I met with their lobbyists, and I got a laundry list of names and contacts of a lot of people that they thought that maybe we could work with. I went to Salem, and I reached out to lobbyists from dairy to the seeds, from grass seeds and lumber and logs, and I mean, you name it. I call a lot of folks. Some people call me back. Some people just said, they're just not there yet. Some people actually came, and actually grass seed was one of them, grass seed and straw. They came and looked into our terminal. And it was just not the right time yet, but they're kind of looking into it. It's probably about time maybe I didn't bother last year because nothing was to even see if nothing was happening, But yeah, I actually gave feedback to the Longshore and their lobbyists of all the people we contact. As a matter of fact, I gave a feedback to our commissioners with a list of all the contacts that we made. And one of the Longshore, I guess, made a public comment they want to sue. Said, no problem. Here is the list of things that we approached and tried to bring in. Again, things change. So that is something that now that things are opening up again, maybe it's time to revisit those folks and then certainly see what works with transportation-wise here. I know with there's a new rail rail area that is being built with Connect Oregon money. That it's in the valley, and that actually could help some of that as well. If stuff come over to that and then bring it to our port here. And again, we have to figure out what are the needs there, because just because there is a need for it doesn't mean our facility is exact ready. Just because we have a dock doesn't mean we are ready to take in whatever. We have to figure out, do we have the equipment? What do we do? One of the conversations that we have been having right now is with the Maritime Administration, because they have some grants for small ports. Although they say it's for small ports, but the minimum ask is still $2 million. Because we want to prepare our 9 acres at the terminal, and we want to be able to bring in new business. But just to ask for a couple $100,000 we can because the minimum it's 2 million. But we talk about equipment. How about, because if we get logs or whatever here, how are we gonna manage that? We end up having to bring a third party to do that work. But if we have our own equipment, we could actually do it. So we had that conversation about maybe if we're able to get this business here, we can apply and get some funds in purchase. It has to be American made and the whole deal. So we have been looking and doing some research and trying to find the best way to make this happen, if it can happen. Sometimes really it needs more guarantee from the customer, and I don't know that we're there yet. That's the only problem. But we'll continue looking, and we have had that conversation. I don't know if that answered your question.
Are there any further questions for Paula? Dimar?
Well, a couple of years ago, the tall ships didn't want to be able to be accommodated.
Yes.
The tall ships weren't being able to be accommodated. What's the status of the tall ships coming in?
The tall ships, well, I'm so glad you asked. I haven't even had a chance to talk to my commissioners about this yet, but I actually just had a meeting a couple days ago, and they are very interested in coming maybe on an annual basis even, but we figure maybe we'll try 1 year and see what happens. Again, I have a whole layout that I would like to present eventually to my commissioners, but of a possibility of maybe next summer bringing them here for 4 days, where you have to put some money up front. It's about it's not much, it's $20,000. They usually require more, double that, but right now they're anxious to get out because they've been restricted with COVID and everything. But we're talking about maybe bringing four vessels here, where 2 would stay at the terminal, and that would be during a time when the fishing vessels would be in Alaska, so probably can work, and maybe have 2 of them taking people out. But I also want to have a conversation with the charter companies. I don't want to have, and make sure that this is a 4-day thing and not an ongoing thing that's going to take anybody's business away. But I see that as an opportunity for not only for the port to showcase our port, but to showcase Newport. Right. And as we have a better idea, obviously, we want to make sure everybody knows what's going on at the city. So because the concept is to attract a lot of people from outside as well. The level that we're looking at it would be, marketing to audience from Portland and beyond. So.
We need today to attract more people.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm working with someone right now. Working on just had that meeting a couple days ago, and we don't know if it's something our commissioners even want, but we will have that conversation. We'll bring it on board if it is something desirable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, how about if we move on to port leases?
Port leases. I think the interest here in terms of port leases that you're talking about. The international terminal, yeah. I don't know if you put that map up that I sent you.
I didn't get it to Peggy, I don't think. So do you have it, Peggy?
I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
When would you have sent it?
Well, I sent it to you.
Yeah. So I don't think I got
About
it to
a
you.
week ago.
I probably didn't get it to you,
Yeah.
Peggy, so
Well,
apologize for that.
Yeah, bottom line is, if we're talking about the international terminal, when you look at it, you pretty much can see what is already developed. And what is developed is pretty much the port. And then you got the area with the tank, where it belongs to Northwest Natural. And and we have about 9 acres right in the beginning of the property there, before you get to the bay. And that's the only area we have for development, really. Everything in between, it really belongs to Ronda's Inc., so it's private property. Apparently, the port purchased some property from the previous owner there to develop it, but there's still about 30 acres that Ronda's is trying to develop. Right now, they're actually working with the blue economy. I don't know if you guys are much about the Oregon blue economy. It's basically there's folks at Oregon State University is involved with it, and so the colleges, the Oregon Coast College, the high school, the port, the several of the businesses around are trying to really enhance the blue economy. And what that is basically, when you say about blue economy, is any business related to waterborne, anything. If it's you cultivating if you are navigating, or Oregon State University has a lot of interest in that. Aquarium could be considered that. And we're looking into maritime opportunities, and it could be warehouses that could enhance those opportunities as well. So Ronda's is really looking into those opportunities right now along with that group. They got some, I think of a couple $100,000 from the EDA to focus on that. It's basically a nonprofit that would really looking into enhancing, again, the blue economy, especially in this area that is so needed. The fishing industry is blue economy and so on. With that said, the port had placed a lot of dredge material on their property, in which the port was paying $1 for, but that basically alleviate them from paying property taxes during that time. But now that they want to develop, then they have the rights to request that after a certain time, which is about now, to have the port remove that material out of there. And whatever materials they don't use, we have to take it somewhere else. And probably going to cost us a couple $100,000 to remove that material. But that we are budgeted for this coming year to do that. The moment that property is terminated from our leases, it basically goes back into the tax roll. So the good part about that is it go back to the tax roll, although it will probably be worth more once it's developed, because right now it's just vacant land. And that's pretty much what we have going on there right now. I haven't heard of any particulars about a project. The port and Ronda's talk on a regular basis. We talk when they're doing their building the ice plant, and we'll continue discussing any opportunities. Not only an opportunity for them, an opportunity for us, but opportunities that we could work together. As a matter of fact, there was a project, one of those Oregon State projects that they put out there with a code name, that the Economic Development of Alliance of Lincoln County, they have put out an application including our property as well as Ronda's together to form that amount of land that they needed for that project. Again, didn't get much further with it, so we didn't discuss it because we don't know, if that's even going anywhere. But we are looking for opportunities together. As a matter of fact, even for some of this terminal use development with the forest industry, we sat on the same table with Ronda's in the event that they need more property that we can offer as well. So we consider ourselves partners, in trying to do something out there and bring something to Newport.
Are there any questions for Paula on the leases? Okay, thank you, Paula. I'd like to turn it over to Councilor Parker. He has some thoughts that he wants to talk to us about marine debris.
Sure. So I'm sure the Port Commission's familiar with issues surrounding marine debris and their effects on the fishery and therefore effects on the economics of this community, which are heavily invested in the fishery. I'd like to try to see if the city can partner with the port to put in some passive marine debris collection devices that have been working really well in Western Australia. It's called the sea bin, that's British English for a trash can, a bin. So seabinproject.com is the website, and They have 860 deployed in Western Australia, and they go in boat basins mostly, and they just basically sit along the tidal water line, and small marine debris is captured in there in a non-mechanized way. It's all physics. So they're designed for the ocean water and bay water to go in there. The marine debris that floats on the surface anyway gets captured, and then port staff remove those collection catchments at whatever cycle, like weekly or whatever. And they have, like I said, they have 860, and so far they've captured 2 million-ish kilograms of marine debris just out of those 860 devices. So they're about the size of a small trash can, and they're mounted in a boat basin, and they just collect the marine debris. And they're only a few $100s each, designed by a longline tuna guy down in Australia. So designed by fishermen to help protect the fishery at a low cost and not adding any FTE costs to mitigate marine debris. So I was going to bring that up to your attention to see if the port could possibly invest in those. There's potential we could use urban renewal money to help the port purchase a few of those as pilot, would be my suggestion. You'd want to put one on both sides of the bay as a pilot though, so in the residential marina and then the day use marina over there, and then in the commercial boat basin as well. There's also passive storm drain filtration nets that they sell, where you can take a high volume storm sewer or storm, not the sewer, but the storm catchments out of storm drains, and put in a high strength polymer net that captures larger debris that would be washed off parking lot surfaces during flood events, or out of parking lots generally, is one of the main sources where landward debris gets into the estuary. And then those are the two main things I was going to mention. And outside of the port property, however, are a lot of larger legacy marine debris items, including a lot of large tires in and around the Coast Guard station. And I'd like to maybe see if we can get a working group put together involving the port, the fleet, ODFW, and state police, along with the Coast Guard, to potentially use DLCD and possibly NOAA Marine Debris Program grant money to start removing these items that are polluting the environment, not benefiting the port in any economic way, and are just there because they're hard to get to, or there's no line item in anyone's budget to remove those items. But it benefits everyone to have a cleaner working marina, and the garbage that's there in the environment that's been there, regardless of whose property is, doesn't economically benefit the fleet or the proceeds from the fleet. So I thought that would be something that we could all work together on. And I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of port employees over the years with their derelict gear program. They're doing a great job on that from the landward side. And
What was the name
there's
of it?
always room for improvement.
The derelict?
Derelict gear program.
Thank you.
It's managed by ODFW. And that's pretty much what I wanted to just bring up as a conversation topic. Be happy to work with you on those things.
I mean, the port is always willing to obviously partner with others to, especially if we don't have to be the ones putting out the problem in general is budget, obviously. Budget is always the issue because once it leaves our port property, it's really, my understanding is it's the responsibility of those who are littering, and then it comes down to DEQ really putting hands on making sure people are not littering. But however, I understand your concerns where things sometimes wash off from the property. And as far as, putting a group together to apply for grant, things like that, absolutely. I think it is something we should work on it. I guess we would have to understand a bit more about this program, because ultimately what happened is even if you use some urban renewal grants money to purchase something, eventually that needs to be replaced, and then there's still some maintenance, and somebody needs to collect and pay for the disposal. So it's just a whole bunch of understanding all the points of what needs to be done to see if it's something we can participate in, on what level. But I was, Walter, do you had some comments earlier?
Yeah, so I'll take this. You can see my face nobody's been seeing for the last year and a half. Yeah, so the port's been actually pretty proactive with that. Myself, as an OPAC member and a port commissioner, Terry Thompson, as Lincoln County Commission OPAC member, and David Allen, when he was part of the city council, was part of the initial marine debris advisory plan and came up with the NOAA marine debris action plan itself. So that was in 2015. I think the plan came out in 17. And so we've already been involved with the Energy for Fishing program. So that's been out there at the terminal. That's where the fishermen bring their gear, the nets, the rope, and that's recycled for fishing. And then I think since then we found out that we're filling it up so fast. I think we're up to 2 or 3 of them now. So we've been addressing this as much as possible, and like Paula said, that some of this stuff is beyond our control. The port at the terminal has a 1200 EZ permit, so I think all of our basins out there already have catch basins in them, and our staff does check them quite a bit. Longview Hills has line recycling containers all around the port. So I think we're doing a great job. I think it'd be I think we'd be more than happy to work with you on that. And I just want to let you know that, and everybody know that the port has been very forward and actually been at the forefront of this, with us being involved with OPAC and having that relationship with them to actually start the NOAA program here in town. So and like Paula said, a lot of it's with money. When we had the one fishing vessel go down at our dock, there's $80,000 for one fishing vessel to clean up, and I think at the time when we devised the action plan, I think they only had $150,000 statewide, and so we worked, and that doesn't include ports on the coast. There's ports inland also, and so I think if we're going to address this, it'd be great if the city could write letters and with the county also to get money into this plan, because NOAA is always looking for ideas and they want to expand on this program. And as far as the sea bins, I think that's something we could work with you with, but I suggest also going to the landing and the Embarcadero, because they're about a third of the fleet here in the basin too. And,
well, I guess one option I know Andrew Mason, the new NOAA Marine Debris Program Director in Seattle, and so a Zoom call could help sift out some of these issues at little cost to the port, except your time, which I know is valuable. I don't think we're where we need to be. I think the port has made a lot of strides and they're exceptional. But the oceanic system is in peril, and it's an economic and environmental issue that we all benefit from if even a few more tweaks are made to reduce inputs from the landward side. So I'd be happy to set up time to make a tick list of things that we could help the port with. Connections, phone calls, things that don't necessarily need a budgetary line item. I've been dealing with marine debris for 12 years full time, so I understand the scale of the problem. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't see it, but if these fisheries want to be sustainable, then that word has to mean something, right? And Oregon's fishery is shoulders above everyone else in the world as far as their efforts. There's no doubt. However, the ocean is a system, right? So the inputs of marine debris from other places in the world affect the fish stocks. And so the cleaner the port is, the longer the now can last without impacting the fishery from our source points. It's kind of my 10,000-foot view.
I couldn't agree with you more. There's just a matter of, again, as Walter indicated, the funding. If we again can partner it up and trying to figure out ways where we can find a funding source, because the port, that's one of the abilities we have. If you look at the at our Oregon revised statute where we're created, we do have abilities to do that, and that is one of the things we can use. Otherwise, the option when it comes to funding some of those cleanups, because if you say it's coming from the fisheries, for instance, that means the only way is to increase fees for those folks, and that it becomes a no-no, because it's already at a point where, we're trying to increase fees to create better facilities for them already as it is. So if there are ways we can do it, like you mentioned, for instance, the derelict vessels program they have here in the state, we're still actually struggling with that,
Right.
quite a bit. As a matter of fact, we're just working on an IGA right now with the state, which it gives us a bit more than they ever given us, but still not enough considering the amount of derelict vessels we deal with on an annual basis. So what ended up happening is the port has to put up that money in order to clean up the vessels so things are not, out there. And so that is already one of, I consider the debris in a way, because it's something that is left by a vessel owner that is not responsible enough. And unfortunately, there are other people that are not responsible enough to create additional debris. And then you gotta ask, how much can we do? Obviously, we want to have a clean port without a doubt. But we're more than willing to listen and to, if you have contacts and there are things we can do to be the good steward of that by any means, we certainly are willing to do so.
Yeah, mostly right now I'm in discussions with Senator Merkley's office in Salem because, he sponsored an ocean dumping prevention and marine debris mitigation bill in the Senate, which as it stands isn't probably going to go anywhere, but it's already written, and so he'll reintroduce it. And an aspect of that includes better funding for the state derelict vessel program, Coast Guard oil cleanup, stuff like that, and also port marine debris mitigation. And so if that were to get 50 votes, that money would come from the federal government for sure. So one of the things I had set up, and everything's because COVID, right? But the senator was going to come out and see the source points in the county for marine debris. 99% of them are on private property. So we can find federal money to give to those business owners to mitigate their own source points, which I think is the most efficient way to do it. With that money comes strings, of course. But the senator's aware that the Yaquina River needs help, and he wants to do what he can. I'm going to speak for him, obviously, but we've had that conversation, trying to get more of the field staff to come out and see the issues. And we've had 2 dry summers, which make it harder to see the problem when the people show up, you know what I mean? Because it's very seasonal. But yeah, let me know what I can help with.
Absolutely. We'll
It doesn't, to get to where we need to be, doesn't have to cost money. And I don't want to seem like I'm assigning work to you, but I think the problem we'll get out of it what we put into it, you know what I mean?
No, I mean, we have obviously a lot of contact with the legislators as well, both state and federal. And if that's one thing we can use by any means, we'll talk to those folks on a regular basis. And ports in general are, always backing a lot of those types of projects as well. And I do believe I remember when that came out, I think we backed that out as well. And we'll continue. And if we need to, there is a better time to see what's happening, we need to bring them here, count on us to be behind that as well.
And I think the final thing I'd say is we can be a leader and set up other ports for success. And the federal government gets especially interested when they're not just benefiting one fleet, but they're benefiting the whole West Coast fleet. Because, a lot of them call in different ports, and if something works here,
we all talk to each other.
We're flying the flag to improve the estuarine quality, not just in this whole state, but in the whole oceanic system along the West Coast. And that's where I think the federal senators will perk up and start to approve things and let, appropriations when that's allowed, to increase funding for not just better gear for the fleet itself, different best practices that come with a federal, funding source. Finding ways to delay photo degradation of the trawl net so that the fishermen don't have to buy them so often. I mean, it's all economic, but there's an environmental benefit to everything that we help the fleet with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That was kind of all I had.
Okay, are there any questions or comments for Ryan?
Could we take a break?
Take a break.
Yes, yeah, well, I would finish with Ryan first.
Steamer's bedtime.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. We're gonna take a 10-minute break, and we'll be right back. So about 5 after, if that's okay with everybody? We are going to get a report right now from Aaron, who works for the port. And if you don't know Aaron very well, Aaron used to work for the Coast Guard. He was the station commander at Depot Bay. And then when he retired, the port stole him. He's done a wonderful job. He jumped in with both feet, and I think you got a real baptism when you first started, if I recall.
Yeah. So hello, my name's Aaron Bretz. We went through a major management turnover right after I started, so we definitely we went without a GM for a little while, and went through a succession of general managers, and so for a while it was just a couple of us at the port that were trying to keep things running. So, but we're past that now, and we're off and running on a bunch of other things. Derek Tokos called me last week and asked to give you a short rundown on some of the projects we have going right now. I don't have any photographs or anything to show you, but I think we'll be able to get through this. So, real quickly, I'll mention Port Docks 3, 5, and 7. Correction, 1, 3, 5, and 7. If you're wondering where Port Dock 1 is, like Paula said, if you're sitting at Clearwater Restaurant looking out the windows at the sea lions and everything else, it's that wooden pier that sticks out right there. That's Port Dock 1. If you're standing at Chelsea Rose looking out at the docks there, that's Port Dock 3. And if you're at Local Ocean Restaurant looking out at the boats, generally speaking, what you're looking at in that area is Port Dock 5. That's the one that has the new pier now leading out to it. And then Port Dock 7 is down at nearest England Marine, but over near the port office. I don't mention the port office because a lot of people don't know where it's at. It's pretty small and you might miss it. On the other side of the bay, of course, is the South Beach Marina and the NOAA facility. Rogue is there also, and then you have the international terminal. So the most visible thing we have going on right now is the completion of the Port Dock 5 pier. That's right there on the bayfront, like I said, across from Local Ocean Restaurant. That project was it was budgeted at $2.4 million project. We're probably going to finish it at about 2.1, maybe 2.2 at the most. So we're under budget and basically on time. It's been about a 5-year planning effort to get it done. The reason why it takes so long for us to do some of these planning, the planning of these projects is because the permitting process for in-water work is rather extensive. There's a consultation that has to occur between several different regulatory agencies that's generally run by the Army Corps of Engineers, and then they kind of reach out to the state agencies that regulate at the state level and the federal agencies. This project was able to get going with it's what you would call a self-mitigating project because we made a smaller pier than the old pier. We reduced the number of pilings, which reduces the environmental impact. And we also now make it generally accessible to diverse users, which means that folks that may be in a wheelchair or walk with a cane or something like that can more easily get down to the docks because we shortened the pier. And so there is a very noticeable, if you go down there, there's a very noticeable difference now. If you compare to the angle of the old gangway as compared to the new one, it's a much easier walk to get down to the docks and back up from the docks. A little bit longer, but nonetheless, it's a much gentler slope. So we're going to do a ribbon cutting on Thursday at noon. We still have a couple of things that we have to do after the ribbon cutting, but the pier basically will look done. We got delayed because of this last year because of COVID-19 restrictions. The electrical supply chain was seriously disrupted, and so anything that you needed to get in the world of electrical supplies was generally delayed for several months or so. So that includes our new cabinet that will go at the end of the pier and hold all of the electrical conductors for the Port Dock 5. So moving past that, the next big thing that we'll have coming up here is replacement of the power pedestals on Port Docks 5 and 3, and the relocation of a meter off of the building at Pacific Seafood. But that's a smaller aspect of it. But the project itself is very much needed because the Port Dock 5 is all of our commercial docks have 30 amp service, and if you've ever been in an RV, imagine going for 30 amp versus 50 amp hookups and the diversity that you can of equipment you can run when you're on a 50 amp service. We're trying to supply commercial businesses with 30 amp service, and it doesn't really cut the mustard. So as a result, you know, what happens a lot of times is they'll pull in the wintertime, and if they've got a load of crab on and they're waiting for a spot at either the plant or maybe they're waiting a spot at our dock, waiting for a spot at one of our piers to offload, they've got to pump on that crab to keep it responsive until it's offloaded. And they do this off of generators a lot of times. So, and then all the other equipment that they have to run while they're in port, if they want to plug in, we really need to provide them with 50 amp service. So we're looking to upgrade that and also put new power pedestals out there. The current marine power pedestals are about 25 or 30 years old and in serious need of replacement. So we increased moorage rates by about just over 30% in about a 3-year time span in order to do this, which was a major undertaking to make that steep of an increase in that short of a time. But I think we're able to do that because we've got some, we're demonstrating that we're putting that money back into the docks instead of it going off into the general fund and going to whatever. It's got an assigned purpose to it. So folks were generally speaking pretty supportive of that project. And right now we're down to, we're putting more efficient and safer plugs on the docks. The old twist plugs that you use for RVs also, but in marine applications are being replaced by a newer design that's still undergoing its listing process through United Laboratories. It has an ETL listing already, so it's already been listed. We have that. It's already a listed product. But the total marine power pedestal unit hasn't yet been listed, and it should get listed here in a couple of months. But before we go in on purchasing the new pedestals, we need to make sure that's going to happen. So working through that right now. If it stays on time, then we should be able to get the project done this fall. If not, we may need to do it in the springtime. We need to find a time of the year when it's a little bit slower in the commercial marina so that we can keep services to a decent degree. I think we have, we'll be working on planning for the replacement of Port Dock 7. Paul mentioned that earlier. It's an extremely important project for us to do. Port Dock 7 is one of our more degraded facilities, and it's an infrastructure project. So one of the most visible infrastructure projects I can imagine would be the replacement of the bridge. And so if you imagine when the bridge was built in 1939 or whatever it was, or 32, what it was built for and the type of traffic and the type of trucks and cars that were going across it versus what it's built for, what you would, if you built it today, what it would look like. It would look completely different. Same concept on docks. The Port Dock 7 was built back when it was more or less, the Newport, or the South Beach Recreational Marina didn't exist yet, and so it used to be a recreational facility, and it was in the 60s. So if you picture recreational vessels from the 1960s using a dock and what you would build that for, that's what it was built for. In the current era, we don't have much of a need in the commercial marina to more vessels of that size and type. So it would be, generally speaking, wasteful to rebuild another facility in that size and that configuration for vessels that we don't have as much of anymore. So we're trying to get this done in a way that it will last another 40, 50 years and continue to follow the trends, the well-documented trends in the fishing industry over that time span, so that we can provide services and continue to allow growth, because Newport is experiencing growth in the commercial fishery, in the commercial fishing marine itself. as other ports recede, Newport has expanded. It's changed the industry. And so if we want to stay on the front of that, if we want to keep our port as a premier commercial fishing port on the West Coast, we need to stay out in front of these trends and build the proper size infrastructure for it. And going back to that permitting issue that I was saying earlier, we have to be really careful about how we do that, because we got to do it in a way that is smart, in the way that that anything you do in the water is going to impact of some sort. But we want to be able to do it so that it creates the least amount of impact. And then when we choose our mitigation projects, we want those mitigation projects to directly benefit us as well, in a way that will benefit the port across the board, because it's tough to pay for this stuff when we get such a small sliver of property taxes. So that's generally the commercial marina. Over on the recreational side, coming out here real soon, we have same kind of issues. Old docks. The marina was built in 1978, and the recreational boating world has changed over that time span. One of my favorite pictures of the Newport, of the boat ramp when it was first built, was of a station wagon backing in with an 18-foot Chris Craft, and so that's what was, the recreational boat in the late 70s. If you picture what it is now, it's more like an F-350 with a 26-foot Aluma weld on it. It's not the same. It's not the same, and so not drastically different, but we want to make sure that as we move ahead, we're picking the right size of the right infrastructure. And electrical is a big issue across the board for us. We just put in some new load centers over there, which is what distributes as the power comes into the facility and gets distributed across all of those docks over there. Each dock has a load center at the top of it that further distributes it out to the electrical buses down on the docks. And so we just replaced those main units at the top of the docks. And when we go to replace those docks, we got, obviously the electrical is tied right in with it. So all of that needs to be reworked. We have a lot of creosote pilings over there as well that need to be replaced. And a number of other projects. So in short, those are kind of the near-term projects around those areas. And I'd be happy to answer any kind of questions anybody has.
Any questions for Aaron?
Good information there.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
What do you think your timing is on some
Deemer, mask.
Oh, what do you think your timing is on some of them?
So I think on the next big, so Port Dock 7 will probably take, again, at least 5 years between developing a plan. Part of the developing of that plan is creating alternatives. So it's almost like you have to at least conceptually design 3 plans, because and one of them has to be a no-build alternative. So what happens if you don't do anything? What's the impacts of that choice versus the impacts of 2 other choices? And then we have to go, it usually takes about 30% engineering plans to submit for permits. And that process in itself would be about 5 years. Or I should say, we could do that within 2 and then have construction started within 5 years, someplace in there. And then, like I said, like Paula mentioned, we're still working on this with the Army Corps, the potential of adding access to that end of the marina too. That's a very important part of it. So,
thanks.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. We're going to talk right now about 343 Southwest Bay Boulevard. Before we do, I'd like, for those of you who don't know, Sea Dogs and the Republic of Candy, those buildings have been basically condemned, and the pilings are bad, and the owner has not expressed any plan yet, so we don't know what's going to happen. But I think that's going to kind of segue into what Paula wants to talk about, the future of the other property on Bay Boulevard.
Yeah, sure thing, and maybe Aaron can back me up here a bit, but just recently we were told by the next door neighbor at the Marine Discovery that our little building there, where we used to also have a small charter company, was leaning against their building. So we had to look at and figure out what was going on. And basically we have Port Dock 1, Clearwater, and then a store there, and then a store cafe thing, artsy thing, and then we had our little property. Our property itself it's just like 400 square feet worth of upland. It's very small, but we had a lot of, a good part of the property was really Department of State Lands lease property, because it's one of those where we just build the dock and lease the property over to a charter company. As we look into it, Aaron went over there with our harbor master, took a look at it, didn't look good, so we hired an engineer to look at it, and literally a very tiny, small percentage of the property was being held by the pilings. So what was it, 20%, 30%?
Yeah, it was about 20%.
Yeah, so
Less than that, actually.
you look at some of the pictures and you go like, not good at all. So with that, we immediately had to condemn the building and tell the tenant they couldn't go in there. So we allowed them there to go remove their stuff once the engineer did some work to make it safe enough to just about that. At that point, we got with the city and had the building officially condemned, and we got somebody over there to remove the building. And now I guess the city has given us about a year to figure out what we're gonna do, either remove the dock that is there, and at this point we have a fence to keep the public from, hurting themselves. And we had actually formed a little committee here of Jeff, Jim, and I, and Aaron to talk about what to do with that building. Looking at all possible alternatives are not looking great, let's put it this way, because the property itself has very little value as it stands, and replacing the pilings there, I mean, this is a project that's gonna cost $1 million, $2 million, depending what you're looking into doing. And then for that tiny, small space, it's like what you get out of it. But we also have to look at it, the future of the port and our needs, not just the current financial needs, but the future actual needs in terms of we are really running out of mortgage spaces. We don't have enough as it is. As I mentioned, we're at 110% capacity or more. And when you look at that, you're like, where else can we put, vessels here? So we had a conversation with the Department of State Lands. The problem is because we only have a sliver. Anything in front of somebody else's property, we have to get their permission before we do anything. There was a floating dock seating in front of the property, but apparently it was never approved by the Department of State Land. The tenant just put that in there, and neither was necessarily approved by the upland owner. So right now, I'm actually in conversations with the upland owner. We're trying to figure it out if they would allow us to work through with the Department of State Lands. Then it may be worth a while for us to proceed in looking into recreating the dock, not necessarily the way it is currently, but in such a way that we would have space for at least 3 vessels. May not pay out immediately, but on the long run, it will be 3 extra space we don't have. There are some concerns from the upland owner about, a fishing vessel versus a charter vessel blocking their view and things like that. So the conversation's still ongoing at this point. We're gonna have to make a decision because we're gonna run out of time for getting permits from the federal government to, put in new pilings and all that. And I know with the city, we have a year to do this, so there's a good chance, depending how this goes, that we may end up asking for extension. Just be aware of it, that, it's either to remove it or to replace it. It's gonna take some work here. And we're hoping, crossing our fingers, that we at least get the upland owner to work with us. If that's the case, then we gotta really figure out the budget, how we can make, that work come up with a good design and plan for an engineer with an estimate that it makes sense on the long run. So there's still that, you know. We don't even want to go through that because those things cost money until we know there's a possibility. So there are a lot of things hanging. It's such a small property, but it can be of good use for us in the future. But at the same time, if that doesn't happen, then the property is basically worthless in a way, because what it comes down to is there are a lot of charter companies interested, but they don't realize the cost of rebuilding that either. You know, they would have the exact same problem we have, you know. So then otherwise we're stuck with just a little bayfront, tiny property there that there's not really much we can do with it at this point. But we're looking at it. So that's pretty much what we have at the moment.
Any questions for Paula?
I have a question. It's not related what you just mentioned, but is there any interest in expanding farming? Have you heard from people interested in farming?
Farming
like oysters or?
Yeah, I don't think, not on that location. We did talk about oyster farms. We have a lot of properties on the bay. Towards the international terminal. If you look at the assessor's map, towards, you know, on the east side of that, you actually see that the port owns quite a bit of property within the bay. And so there's been conversations with some folks that work for OSU and some others about oyster farming. I think, again, they needed more money. I don't know if they were ready for, but the conversation's there, and we're certainly open for those types of developments if the opportunity comes up. But certainly it wouldn't be on this property.
Yeah, I was curious about other properties. Yeah, not a particular property. I think it's very small there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your properties and ours, are they water dependent, water related? Do you know what they're zone?
I don't know.
I believe that they are water dependent, but I'd have to confirm that, so.
But it just, I mean, there's most of the bayfront's private, but, you know, city owns some, but it's you know, we're all in charge of that. And it's very important that stays water dependent. You know, we don't want to turn out like Seattle and some of the other, you know, ocean side or port side, you know, cities where it starts becoming houses and things like that. And then, you know, I've talked with Commissioner Jacobson, and Newport is the last entirely working waterfront on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's a unique character to this area, and I think that would be really important that we, you know, future port commissioners and future city councilors to keep that in mind, that is one of the attractions. And, you know, it's a beautiful view from there, but having that working waterfront is a benefit to the community and to the overall bayfront. So sorry for that, but just personal feelings.
Okay, anything else for Paula? Okay, thank you, Paula. We're gonna move on to a discussion of stormwater outfall with Chris and Aaron. And Chris, do you want to come over here and sit?
And I think we'll have Aaron start, and then we'll have Chris follow up, so.
Okay. This was something that we've been talking with the city a little bit about here over the last few years. There's a couple of locations that are causing us some challenges, in particular in the commercial marina. There's stormwater outfalls from the city that are installed. Basically, if I was working for the city, they're right where I would put them. They're just a little bit outside of Army Corps jurisdiction. So they're just above. Army Corps jurisdiction is at the mean high water mark, and state or DSL jurisdiction is at the highest recorded tide mark. So if you install some kind of project inside of their jurisdictions, you have to go through that lengthy permitting process that I was talking about. If you were to put some infrastructure in that's just outside of that, then you just have to square it away with the property owner, make sure it meets all the zoning requirements and some other number of other requirements, and you can go ahead with that. It's not as difficult, though, to permit as if you build it in the water. The reason why the permitting process exists is to prevent, in particular with outfalls, you want to, there's a 401 water quality certification that you have to get for these type of projects. which is covered under the Clean Water Act. And it prevents you from being able to discharge water into the waters of the U.S. that has contaminants in it. And then stormwater permits, generally speaking, have to do with contaminants, but they also, in some cases, have to do with turbid water. Turbid water is water that has particulates suspended in it. And the reason why that's important is because eventually all of that material has to settle out of the water, and it collects on the bottom and decreases depth. So when you install an outfall just outside of where you would have to, answer all of the questions for folks about turbid water and things like that, you can flow clean water into the waters of the U.S. or the state at such a rate that still takes the bank and pushes it and suspends it and makes it exactly the same thing that you would otherwise not be allowed to do, if you follow me there. So basically what's happening to us is there is a massive there's a high volume of water coming from an outfall that empties into the commercial marina right next to where the old Fern plant viewing platform is down there by in between Port Dock 5 and where the commercial marina starts. And if you look at the mudflat there, it's taking the mudflat and it's putting it into the marina. There's a pretty substantial channel that's been cut into it. You can clearly see it. I've been documenting we've been doing depth surveys on this location for 3 years, and there's definitely a shallower area where the water flows out, and then over by Swedes Dock and our hoist dock, it's depositing it there. So this is a challenge that we are trying to figure out what to do with it. The city's done what they're supposed to do as far as install engineering devices in the outfall itself to try and slow the flow of water. They're just simply being overpowered, and it's a lot of water that comes out of this thing. I don't know what the solution is to it, but for us the impact is sediment gathering in the commercial marina and the need to dredge more frequently. So that's.
And if I may add, sorry, and basically what we're doing now is we're looking for some solutions that we can work with the city and figuring it out how to address that, because ultimately it is coming from an outfall from the city, but it's causing a problem for the port. So how can we resolve this? And there may be some studies that needs to be done. I don't know, maybe some redesign or, so that's why we're even bringing this up.
And it's important, I think, to reiterate, the reason why I mentioned all that permitting stuff is what the city is doing is not, it's completely legal. It's completely within standards. It's completely above board. We've got an easement from the port to be able to install this pipe there. It's just it's an outcome, I think, that nobody really envisioned when the project began, and it's resulting in something that probably would not have been intended, I think.
So I can give a little bit of history on the project, the Baymore storm drain improvement project that happened. Basically, as a lot of you are aware, the Embarcadero hotel had a previous storm drain outfall that failed and contributed a lot of sediment to a portion of the Embarcadero outfall. And the city was they began a project to replace that outfall, and part of the failed storm system there required the city to go in and clean up that outfall and dredge a couple spots that were the result of a failed outfall. If you look upstream from the collection point, from that outfall location, the storm system actually diverted flow from Olson Creek further to the west and brought it all the way along the Bay Road to the Embarcadero outfall. And so through working with the Army Corps of Engineers and Department of State Lands, we put a new outfall on the west side of the port offices near that entrance by our booster pump station, which is historically where the natural topography should have an outfall in that location. So that's kind of the history of why so much extra storm drainage was diverted to that location. It's not so much a issue of erosion protection as much as it is the fact that we are now experiencing a large amount of storm drainage runoff in that location. It's a quantity issue, not a quality issue. The basin is fully developed upstream of that area, and what we're seeing here is through this initial first couple years of that outfall becoming more stabilized as an estuary mudflat habitat is a forming of a channel and sediment being pushed out a ways from where it was initially backed up. One thing that the state gained from this, Department of State Land gained from this project was estuary mudflat habitat credits for creating I think 180 square feet of additional mudflat estuary habitat with the creation of this outfall at that location. That was done through the Army Corps 404 permitting. That's just a little bit of the history. The channel, there is definitely now, due to the quantity of storm drainage that now goes there, a channel has formed. You can see it's a little bit sinuous. It's not a straight shot out. But it's true, there is a migrating of the mudflat that was originally up on the bank and it got pushed out. I'm not sure if additional riprap is the answer for it. There is quite a bit of riprap already there. There is quite a bit of a drop that the water needs to go onto before meeting the mudflat area. And so adding additional riprap might just push the channel out further along the mudflat and create further sediment entrainment and pushing the sediment out further and filling other areas. So when it comes to dredging, it's more of a maintenance situation than more than a capital improvement where this kind of lies. But I see the initial function of the outfall creating that push out of sediment from the mudflat.
Aaron?
So is the problem the volume of sediment or that it's moving? So if you could slow it down so it drops out of the flow earlier, stays up on the mudflat, would that be an acceptable solution?
That might help.
This seems like you could come up with some engineered solutions to get it to meander and slow down and drop out of the flow.
That's kind of one of the ideas that I think part of it has to do, it's just like Chris was saying, is the volume that's coming out of there is so great. I think that because the county approach is about the exact same thing down by the extension office. They were talking about putting a parking lot up in there and making the drain run down that entire hillside.
Nice.
And we were like, hang on a second, because it's going to come out of there and it's going to push a mudflat in the river, you know. So what they came up with was basically an outfall that came down, and they put at the bottom of it basically a really big catch basin so that the water would flow into it and then it would fill up and overflow. So it'd be kind of like a spillway. But I'm not an engineer, and so I don't know, but I imagine that you're talking about a pretty sizable, in order to slow it that much, it would probably have to be pretty big, but I don't know. But that might be one solution.
There might be other ways too. You might be able to do a combo of things, but again, if the goal is not to stop the sediment but keep it where you want it,
right?
I would think that's an easier problem to solve than stop the sediment.
Right. Yeah.
I assume that sediment's. I mean, I know over by the Embarcadero that had been
you could use
filled in and lost some.
It's a stilling pool, and it's used, and that will be overwhelmed for an annual winter flow with the quantity that's going down there. But there could be additional mitigation measures. The issue that we have as a city is that this is not jurisdictionally an area where we can navigate well and without going through coordinating with all of the state agencies and regulatory and the port. And so we're open to.
And I know the state was part of the permitting process, because that took several years before we actually could put those outfalls together. But I assume that maybe was more related to the dredging that had to take place than this outfall specifically.
I don't think it would have, it probably wasn't counted as an in-water construction, at least to that, to the same extent that most of our projects usually do, because they're.
I can't remember, but it might have been. I know the dredging had a window. Extensive permitting window that took years to resolve.
Yeah,
I can't remember if this outfall was one of the parts that had to only go in that tight window. But I know that whole project had some distinctive windows. I'm sure we could look through the old files.
There was two separate windows. There was the window for the dredging, and then there was the window for the cofferdam construction for this specific outfall. Yeah.
So one of the other possible solutions that we've kind of thought about would be if you could somehow get the outfall to get out to the water as it is, because if it's draining into the water, then the river itself will dissipate the energy, and you wouldn't have this problem at all. But then you would need to extend that outfall further out across the mud flat, so where it actually empties into the water.
Plus, I assume you might end up running into turbidity issues I don't know, that's getting out of my expertise by a long way, but I assume they don't want a big mud plume out there either, even if it does dissipate.
It's the same, but that's my point, is that because of where the outfall exists now, that question's not really being asked a great deal. It's still doing the same thing though. It's the same situation. It's just that but there are benefits that, because I think the city owns a bunch of property right there. And if you can figure out a way to do it and get it out, you might be able to add some area that you could use for something else on top of it. So there's definitely things that you could do to get the water out, where it needs to go and still be able to take advantage of it.
But I think on this issue, we're certainly willing to have discussions and try to determine if there's something we jointly can do to try to address this issue. There's a lot of challenges with this, and it's going to take some expertise, beyond what we have internally. So we can certainly put this on our burner for further discussions.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, thank you, Aaron and Chris. Appreciate your time. Yeah, we're going to move on to Mike. Come on down. Mike is our Public Works Director. Our Public. Oh. He's our Parks.
Is that promotion? I don't know.
Congratulations. You certainly don't want that.
So I appreciate the time, everyone here, allowing me to come and talk. I know it was a last minute add to the agenda. But I was reviewing through the Park Master Plan, and in there it identified a project back in 2019, and was able to talk briefly with Aaron over dinner tonight. In the project is improvements to the non-motorized boat ramp in the South Beach Marina. And obviously that property is 100% the port's, but believe the current access and the access for non-motorized is on the old boat launch ramp there by Rogue Brewery. And Aaron was telling me that he believes back in 2018, 2019, that discussion was brought up, not through the community, but I believe Aaron might have. Well, Aaron, I won't speak for you, but.
Yeah, I think Derek asked me about it. He asked, and I mentioned that I think what we've got is a situation where the port improved this area for this purpose, and I get people ask me about this all the time, like, how come you guys don't have a spot to launch kayaks? And we do, and I think it's a wayfinding issue is what we have. And when Derek and I talked about it a couple years ago, that was I think what our discussion was could we maybe get some improvements done in there to further show people how to get to it, or whether that's public messaging.
Yeah, and then within our Park Master Plan, it identifies signage, wayfinding, and parking signage, just to help direct the public there. And haven't had a chance to discuss it with anybody at the port. That's why I wanted to bring this up and put it on the agenda, just to initiate some conversation I myself, and I know talking with Spencer, we as the city would love to support this project in any way or fashion. Recently had some discussion with Lincoln County that they're pursuing some grant money through the Economic Development Administration. And they're hoping here within the next couple of weeks, they'll get some more details. It's looking like $3 billion or $3 million. Huge price difference. But they're looking for players within the county to chip in on projects that are easy projects, shovel-ready projects or close to being ready that are based around recreational and tourism, job creation, job sustainability. And so this would be potentially, could be one of those projects. But that's what I wanted to add it onto the agenda just to bring it to the port's attention that it was identified in our park master plan, and would love to partner, assist, support however we need to from the city side to make that happen.
Also, since there's still some urban renewal money for South Beach, couldn't that be part of that money be used from urban renewal to do some whatever?
If it's in the plan, it could be, and that's what we would have to check, is to see if there's something that's tied to the plan that we could potentially do a minor amendment to do that project. It's not a specific project outlined in the urban renewal plan, so.
Because I remember talking to the consultant there, trying to figure out what else could be added, so it seems like there was an opportunity to add additional projects in the area, so.
So as you participate in these virtual meetings, make sure that gets mentioned several times.
So I had to bring it up.
Okay, anything else then, Mike?
Nope, that's it. I just wanted to initiate that discussion, and definitely feel free to contact me for any support that we can do.
And Mike, your new office at City Shop should be available tomorrow.
Appreciate it, guys.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we want to open up the floor to anyone if anybody wants to make any general comments or ask questions.
Just one thing that we had talked about putting on the agenda, but there's been discussion about doing a project on South Beach for the storage and something that potentially the wine and seafood could potentially take advantage of. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think what we're talking about here is what we call it Expo Center, which is different than the old event center, just to be clear. I think the old event center was more of a sophisticated building with way more, where there's the feeling that it could be competition with hotels and things like that. And what we're talking about here is literally an outdoor building. It's a building that could replace $130,000 annual price tag for thing that the Seafood and Wine Festival pays out every year. So the chamber spending a lot of money, and then the other festivals that they use and that could be used for. And when you talk about, is there any opportunity for an RV expo or boat, or anything like that, or concerts or other events, we have really not many places that is wide open, because even the fairgrounds, there are smaller rooms, you're talking about. So at this point, it's just on, we're looking into possibility of doing a plan to see if it's worth a while moving forward. I believe we put a tag price of $30,000 just to do some look at financials, if it makes sense, marketing efforts, and if it's, who we're tagging to, and what, does this project make sense if we do it, say, in our dry camp area, because that's where the seafood and wine goes, how we're going to replace the revenues that come from that area, and where else can we put other people, folks, you know, and so all those things would be part of the planning. So it's just, let's look at it, let's see if it's worth a while. We're actually looking for grants right now. As a matter of fact, I just had a discussion with our grant writer today about some possibilities from on the travel grants that are sort of available for that sort of things. So again, we're looking at a way up here at this point still, but every time we talk about it, the chamber is very excited about any opportunity that ever happening, because every year it's a ritual trying to bring in those tents in, and every time the damages are, you know, are pavement, and then you're trying to figure out a way so the rain doesn't come through, and it's an ordeal, truly. So again, nothing's concrete at this point. It's just a plan for the plan. Any questions?
Anybody have anything else? Okay, at this time, Jan?
Oh, well, not about that, but are we in the council and commission comments still?
Yeah.
Okay, so two things I wanted to just mention. One had come up a couple of times in the transportation system planning conversations that have already been happening about some possible like ferry access across the bay. Have you all talked about that or thought about that? I don't know, like that was just something that came up quite a bit about some way to like get to the bayfront, not over the bridge. And I'm gonna just say the second thing. Earlier, Councilor Parker mentioned the piece about, you know, there is debris right now that it kind of feels like there's a, well, it's not on our property kind of thing, but I'm not certain whose property it is, or it's just, I think, you know, if Solve is cleaning the beaches, can we all, and that's a, you know, all of us, we, community, we, work with Surfrider, work with Solve, work with the state folks to get some of this like really obvious, apparent, like visible debris out of public spaces that, you know, I just feel like that's something that I don't know if we need 4 more meetings, but I think we could like plan a day, right? And I'll just take part of getting rid of some of this stuff. And so it felt like he was bringing some of that up as like, he sees it all the time. I think we all see it depending where we're looking, right? And I just wonder if there isn't some, you know, effort to focus more on the bay perimeter to clean up some of that.
To your second point, I believe there are some organizations that have done some of that, and the port actually usually provide permits for free. You know, we don't charge them to use our property for their efforts. But again, it goes back to what we discussed before in terms of funding is always the issue, but we're certainly always willing to be a partner on the effort. And we'll be happy to further discuss that. On the first, I only been here at the port for 2 years, and quite frankly, I haven't heard about the ferry conversation. I heard that a lot of my old port about a ferry crossing the Columbia. It seems like that is now coming this way, but I'll be happy to hear more about it if there's some conversation worth having. You know, for some folks that already maybe have been part of that conversation before.
I think we had talked about maybe having some kind of a water taxi service for tourists, so they wouldn't have to drive over the bridge. They could go from South Beach over to the bayfront. Seems like it would be a win-win thing during the high season.
Well, I think it was Travel Oregon that we worked with a couple years ago and talked about this, and I pointed them towards some resources. What you're basically talking about is either an inspected or an uninspected commercial passenger vessels, what it would have to be. So, and business-wise, it would be a question of volumes. How many people can you provide, and how steady of a service is it going to be? I think it's something that, whether the port kind of shepherded it or whoever did what, it's a private business that would need to, and it depends on what you're looking at. It depends on what you have envisioned. So an uninspected commercial passenger vessels is 6 paying passengers or less. So that's what that number looks like. So it's usually a smaller boat with less overhead and less fixed costs. But you know, the bigger the boat you get, you have to pay for an annual Coast Guard inspection, haul outs and things, and it gets really expensive. So you know, those are some of the things that go into it. But we have kind of worked with a couple of state agencies to try and get that moving at some point. I don't know whatever happened to it though. right now, so.
Yeah, and if you're talking about a larger vessel when it comes to that, then you're dealing with, okay, if this is seasonal, is it worth it? In my experience, every time we deal with things like that, it's always, again, on the private side of things, is it worth it for them to do it? Because it's certainly not something that I believe the port would put on as our service, you
Right.
know?
No.
So we have to find a private party that is, you know, and that we can work it out. And certainly, if it was something makes sense, that we could work it out, some sort of arrangement for a seasonal lease, you know, permit for the, better saying, for a period of time. But it's just a matter of, is it worth it for them, you know? And since I have been here, I haven't heard of anybody approaching. Maybe that happened before, but it didn't amount to anything that I'm aware of.
I might add, the city of Newport in the past, speaking with older city engineers and Don Davis especially, who said where the old city hall was on the bayfront at the end of Fall Street and Canyon Way was saved as a potential ferry location. It's currently used right now as a parking lot at the end of where Herbert turns into Canyon Way, turns into Fall Street, and then that right away straight on through as a potential ferry slip.
And that's one thing that I, in my old discussions over in the St. Helens area, because they had a lot of those same discussions crossing from Oregon to Washington. It's the problem with ferries, it's always the parking lot. It's both sides, because as you think most, it will be tourists just not wanting to, but you still, most of the time, people are gonna have to park one side or another, and that usually becomes the problem. You still gotta have to have certain amount of real estate for the parking portion. And what is it worth it for them to pay for parking? Is it free? How it's gonna be? Because if they're paying for parking and just for not walking across may not be worth it for them. So there's a lot involved, but usually the parking area is always the problem that I'm aware of.
Okay, go ahead.
I do have a question. So I'm the liaison for the city from being on the port. Anyway, but on June 7th, you guys had a presentation by Bird Ride Inc. And so I know this is off subject, but anyway, and they, Kate Shoemaker did a presentation to the city. Anyway, and so I know that they're gonna bring more information back to you about this process and having what they are is electric scooters that ride around Newport. Anyway, and my concern is for the bayfront and our port. And between the tourists and the fishermen down on the port, the sidewalks are pretty busy. So I'm just kind of curious when you guys are considering that, if maybe you would consider the port and, you know, how you're going to put all that together if you choose to bring this group to Newport. So
yeah, I think just on that particular issue, we've been approached by Bird Scooters to provide that service within the city of Newport. The city council heard the presentation from Bird Scooters. They have relayed that back to staff to develop, you know, kind of a further understanding of how that would work and what would the mechanism be for trying to govern that sort of a situation and bring that back to the council. That probably won't be coming back to the council until I'm guessing August at this point. It's not likely that something can happen for this summer. Okay. There's quite a bit of work to do, and certainly any feedback from anybody on this issue would be appreciated. So if the board wants to provide commission, provide any input on this, we welcome all input. So,
thank you. And to that point, my understanding is that the scooters cannot be operated on the sidewalks.
So it does create a further danger potentially that you have cars that already exceed that like parking, perimeter or boundary out, and then you have scooters and you have very narrow passageways. Like there's a lot of concern, yes.
I can't wait to see Jeff on a scooter down there.
We're gonna let me beta test it, and the number of injuries I incur will.
We're gonna test that new ramp that's like super easy to.
It'll be really easy to get them down there. I'm just wondering how much it will wind up in the bay.
That's kind of what I was gonna say.
I don't believe they do it out there.
There'll be a lot of debris of scooters.
You can ride the whole thing in the water.
Yeah, let's find it with credit card and your name.
They'll make it down just fine. They just won't make
Okay,
sense.
now comes our fun time, and it's public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to give public comment to either the city council or the port commission? And we're all looking at you.
No, I had public comment. Glad I could come tonight and see everybody again. It's been a year and a half, and I see many familiar faces, and I think it's great. We're going to get back on track.
Hey, thanks for coming. Well, Tuesday night at midnight is the countdown, and the state will open, and we can't wait for that. Anyway, at this point, I would like to adjourn the joint meeting between the Port Commission and the City Council. And I would like to thank the Port Commission for being here tonight, and Paula. And we want to do these again. And hopefully next year we can do it at the new building down in Southeast.
Really helpful. Thank you so much.
Anyway, and I'll turn it over to you because you will have a Port Commission meeting and we will kind of fade into the background. Thank you all very much.